Are you a fan of the Iron Sysadmin podcast? If you are, don't forget you can support the show via Patreon at patreon.com/ironsysadmin. Or you can buy merchandise at teespring.com/stores/ironsysadmin. And thank you. Are you a fan of the Iron Sysadmin podcast? If you are, don't forget you can support the show via Patreon at patreon.com/IronSysadmin. Or you can buy merchandise at teespring.com/stores/IronSysadmin. And thank you. News, ops, and a little bit of paranoia. Welcome to the Iron Sysadmin Podcast. Welcome, everybody, to tonight's episode of the Iron Sysadmin Podcast. I'm your host, Nate, and joining me tonight is Uncle Mark with what I assume is tasty bourbon.
My fun Buffalo Trace. I actually have a bourbon emergency. I've got maybe one more dose left.
Is that a burb emergency?
A burp emergency, sure.
Yeah,
Is the music still going?
Yeah,
that
kinda.
was weird.
It'll keep going. Do you not hear it?
All right. It's like when
totally music.
when you take the hearing test at the doctor.
No, I mean it's over now. Does that make you feel any better? I can play it again. No, let's not do that. That's long. It's a long intro. I always fought with how long that intro should be, but I think it worked out.
It went on much longer than it has in the past.
Yeah, okay.
But these
anyway,
fine nerds aren't here to hear us talk about the intro, right? Well, maybe they are. I don't know.
Yeah, well,
some of our fans are weird.
It's valid, right? If people think the intro is too long, let us know. But I think it's good. I like it. Anyway, let's see. So tonight, we've had I think it was our last episode, right? We talked about how we learn. And one of the things we talked about
sounds familiar.
How we learn is that we like to get our hands on software, right? And when you get your hands on the software, you tinker with the software, you learn the software, right? There's a couple ways to get that done, but unfortunately, when you're talking about a career in IT, or a career as a sysadmin, or a career even as a developer in some cases, the stuff that you need to learn is blocked behind very expensive licensing, right? And so how do you get your hands on it to learn it? So what I wanted to do tonight was talk about a couple ways you could do so, and then I even went through and I made, I don't know, it's not exactly an exhaustive list, but it's a pretty big list of different pieces of software and where you can find demos and trials of that software. So we're going to go through and we're going to talk about each of these, and I want to caveat this with one thing. I didn't call sales reps or whatever and ask about education licenses or anything like that. Those may very well be options for several of these things, right? I didn't dig that deep into each one of these. I did quick Google searches. I looked around their websites. Some of these companies made it very hard to find free versions of their software or demos of their software. So if I missed something, I'm sorry. That's all I'm going to say about that. So, first of all, I want to cover the obvious answer is if you're a student, right? You may already be a student. You may be enrolled in some institution of higher learning that has an IT program or has a comp sci program. There are special programs, and I don't mean software, but programs as in organized things, for higher education that can get almost free software so that institutions can put it in the hands of students so those students come out the door already familiar with their software, right?
I think we call that already addicted to that particular.
Yeah. So some of them
believe that they honestly can't use a spreadsheet or write a word processing document unless the application is from Microsoft.
Right. So, but I mean, this is true for server-side software. It's true for a lot of enterprise-level software. That's not just Excel and Word, right? When I worked in higher ed, we had an educational site license that could basically be used for anything on campus. We used it for all of our enterprise stuff, and we could use it for learning. We could use it for HPC stuff. If a student really wanted to use RHEL, we could probably set it up for them, right? So just keep that in mind. If you're already a student,
Right.
ask. It can't hurt to ask. Ask your teacher. Ask, your counselor. Is that the word they use now? The person who helps you pick classes
I
and whatever.
think so.
And
Your
see if you can figure
advisor?
that.
I think they're
Advisor.
your
That's the
advisor.
word I'm looking for. Advisor. And see
So-
if you can get what you're looking for that way. Go ahead, Mark.
So two things.
Sure. Two things.
Non-topic. I can't read their name in the chat because it's fuzzy because
Okay.
of Riverside, but you might see it.
Yeah.
Looks like we have a fan who wants to know how they might be able to support us.
Oh.
So,
Well,
so
there's a couple ways to support the show, and we'll cover this quickly because we usually talk about it a little more in depth around the middle of the show. You can quite simply go to Patreon, patreon.com/ironsysadmin, and support us that way. Or if you would rather buy a shirt or something, we have a Teespring shop, and there's links for that that'll be in the notes of the show. But it's like teespring.com/stores, I think, /ironsysadmin. But yeah, go check that out.
yeah.
That's the way to do that.
And if you become a patron, then you get a shout out every single show.
Yeah.
And if your name is really cool, we might make
we
a
might
big
even
deal
make fun
about
of it.
So no, we never make fun of them.
No,
But
no.
some of the names are a lot of fun.
Yep. Yep.
Like my buddy Two.
Yep. So
The other thing is, we've talked about software, and we're going to talk mostly about software. But if you're a student, there are sometimes also opportunities to buy hardware at a reduced cost.
yes.
That is one way that a lot of people ended up with Apple computers, especially in the 90s, because their educational discount was pretty significant.
Yep.
So that's another thing.
I can tell
And
you
then-
that at the place I worked, they had a desktop machine rotation that was pretty severe. It was like once every 3 or 5 years. So you'd end up with a machine that was like used by an office worker or something, right? Not high end, but a machine, CPU and memory that you could have gotten. Most of them went back on a truck, but they had programs where students could get their hands on it if needed, especially kids that were
Well,
underprivileged, right?
Apple
ahead.
used to have a very aggressively discounted program for new hardware too.
That too,
But I don't
yes.
know how that is nowadays.
What I was thinking of, like, I have a number of desktops sitting around here that I use for various things that came from the college,
Mhm.
right? Completely above board. I didn't like sneak into some back room and steal them, right? Because that's not how I am.
Right. Right.
It was just like we have, X percentage have to go back, X percentage have to go away.
Right.
And the go away is give to students, give to employees that need them. Students, of course, come first. But I've got a number of quote unquote servers that are just old desktops that were pretty heavy in horsepower.
Yeah, my prior job, they never really wanted the hardware back. The equipment through Red Hat, I think every time I've gotten a laptop, it's been leased, so it has to go back.
Yeah.
But at Merck, there was an awful lot of hardware that just got effectively obsoleted.
Yeah.
And if you wanted to take it to use, as a home lab or something, that was not ever really an issue. The other obvious answer, before we start talking about, getting demo versions or free versions of commercial things, there's a huge amount of software that's legitimately legally free. Open source
Yep.
and free software. We talk about the free aspect of free as in freedom. We can look at the source code. We can know what we're running.
Yep.
But this is where the free as in beer is obviously really important.
We're going to touch on a number of those too, because there's a number of things that you can pay for. For example, Red Hat Enterprise Linux, right? You can pay for that, or there's lots of ways you can get it directly for free, or you can get a derivative of it for free, right? And there's a ton of open source programs that are projects that are just like that. So we will touch on those too as we're going through the list. Now, the other thing I want to touch on, mainly because it's part of how I learned some software, but I am not going to condone it, and that is if you cannot find demo software, you cannot find free copies of said software, you may get creative and find other alternative methods to get a hold of software maybe you should have paid for. I'm not condoning piracy, I'm not condoning theft. However, in my heart, I feel like if the purpose is to learn a piece of software so that you can then later afford to purchase those things, I don't know. That's kind of a gray area. Ask your own conscience. Ask your own legal
So
terms. I can tell you, Microsoft is probably not going to chase down some kid who pirated one copy of Windows to learn it better, right? They're looking for the enterprises that
I
are using
mean,
it a lot. My Oracle
I
might.
I I, yeah, friggin' Oracle. I hear you there, but honestly, open source is in
Yes,
such a better place than it was years ago that for most applications or for most things, there is a very robust open source solution
personally,
uh, in
what
pretty
I
much every vertical.
what I would say is if a software vendor does not make their software accessible to someone who wants to learn it to better themselves and to get a job, that software deserves to be inaccessible to those people and it deserves to die. That's my take.
That's that's harsh, and I'm not going to argue that. But you know, where I mean, you and I are both Red Hatters, so we
Right.
kind of come from the same.
Yes,
We're
yes.
cut from the same cloth there.
Right. So, all that out of the way, I've organized these into sort of categories. I started with operating systems. We're going to talk about VM stuff. We're going to talk about just sort of industry tools and software, um, and even cloud
Hmm.
providers, right? Because believe it or not, cloud providers really want you to get addicted to their stuff. I mean, really want you to
Oh,
learn their
so
stuff.
much, so much.
So,
In fact, that's
because
really that's really where a lot of software dollars are going to be coming from. In the already, there's a lot of dollars flowing through these cloud services, but that's just going to become more and more so over time.
right,
I
right,
really believe that.
yep. So, sorry, I just thought of something I wanted to add to the notes here. But we're going to start with the thing that we would obviously start with, and that's Red Hat Enterprise Linux, right? We've talked about our backstories when we learned Red Hat Enterprise Linux or Red Hat Linux. It was just Red Hat Linux. There wasn't a pay version unless you considered the $20 or whatever you spent on a book that had RHEL in the back cover or Red Hat in the back cover, right, as a pay license. But nowadays, if you truly want to learn official RHEL, there are, obviously you can go pay a couple $100 to get a RHEL license. Probably don't want to do that. There's a developer
Subscription.
subscription. There is a developer subscription, which includes RHEL and a couple of the add-ons, but not bigger things like Satellite. Mainly, it's the RHEL platform. Things you can do things like run containers in Podman and all the stuff that's included with RHEL. I didn't get an exhaustive list of every single piece that's included in that, but I know Satellite's not, and that's a thing you might want to learn if you're learning RHEL. Maybe not at the beginning, but eventually you might want to learn that.
Maybe.
It doesn't include like insights, things like that. I don't think. Am I wrong there, Mark? Does it include insights?
Uh, I
It
think the
might.
developer subscription might. Now, so other than the fact that we're Red Hat shills, why are we saying you want to learn RHEL rather than, you know,
Well,
Ubuntu
this
or any
is.
other or SUSE? Like, why RHEL?
I actually,
Why?
I actually meant to include Ubuntu in the list, and either ran out of time or forgot. So I don't know if somebody in the chat wants to look up what, like, if there's a equivalent of a free Ubuntu, or is it just go download Ubuntu server? You don't get support. I don't know how that works. But for the reason I would suggest RHEL is because it is sort of the standard nowadays. I think it's the standard. Maybe we're colored by that. I don't know, but there's also free editions of it that aren't necessarily um, supported by Red Hat, except CentOS is. But like Alma Linux, Rocky Linux, things like that, those are effectively clones of RHEL. So it's kind of ubiquitous at this point.
Right. What I was going for is that if you want to get into enterprise IT, the probability is high that the Linux you'll be touching is RHEL or some derivative of RHEL,
Or RHEL
whether
similar,
that's
right?
whether that's a downstream clone, whether that's Oracle Linux, which is an enterprise Linux based on RHEL, it's a downstream clone that's supported by Oracle, stuff like that. And yeah, you do see Debian, and Debian's like the older traditional server flavor of Ubuntu. You do see that in some shops, but if you needed to pick one Linux to learn, you could only pick one. Then you're going to want to do a RHEL or a RHEL derivative. That's why we say that. And again, this the Iron Sysadmin is not a Red Hat production. We don't get bribed or told what we have to say from Red Hat.
Right.
I feel like we always have to be real careful when
Yeah.
we talk
So
about Red Hat on here.
the
But I mean that's the industry. If I'm giving advice to
yeah.
somebody who's trying to break into Linux as their IT career, right now, for better or for worse, RHEL is the most prevalent enterprise Linux.
And again, that may not sound like much coming from two Red Hatters. However, you need to remember that, believe it or not, a lot of people, you might even say most people that work at Red Hat because they liked Red Hat before they worked there. Just look at me and Mark's backstories, right? Both of us had a history in Red Hat before we were ever employees, right?
Yeah.
There's a reason for
And
that.
right, and we have some input on Ubuntu, and it's like I thought, but I'm
Yeah.
glad someone's vetting it.
Yep.
It is free to use, but you can buy support. I think Canonical provides the support.
Canonical
They
provides
provide.
support, yes.
I believe that
Yeah,
would be
and
the
that's what I thought it was. I was going to get to that as soon as we were done explaining why we were talking about Red Hat. But yeah. So right, as I mentioned, and as we just uncovered, yes, Ubuntu. There are enterprises running on Ubuntu. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying they don't exist. If you want to learn Ubuntu, it's just like go get Ubuntu server. It's not, there's no, you're not forced to pay for a subscription. If you want support, then you get a subscription, which is very different than the Red Hat model. Although it's not quite different now that we have the developer sub. It's a different model.
It
but
is a slightly.
It's
Yeah, if you want to run RHEL and you don't want to jump through any sort of effort or paywall, you got a couple of choices. The two most mature downstream rebuilds of RHEL are Rocky Linux and Alma Linux. And for those of you who aren't familiar with what a downstream rebuild is, because Linux is open source, if you sell an open source product, you are obligated to make the source code available, and then whoever gets that source code can share it with anyone else they want to. That's completely legal. So what people have done, and this is working as intended, is they've created versions of Linux that are essentially the RHEL source code with the branding stripped out, and they are as compatible with RHEL as possible.
Yep.
And a lot of companies or people will use that for learning, or they'll use it for their sandbox or dev or test environment so that they don't have to pay production subscriptions for that. And that's fine. You can do that. There's no moral or legal qualms with that at all. So if the Debian and Rocky rebuilds are a way to get them without jumping through hoops. If you want
You mean
what
Alma?
Yeah,
You mean Alma
Alma. Did I
Linux.
say something?
You said Debian.
Yeah, Alma Linux.
Debian is the opposite of a RHEL
It must be the long COVID kicking in. You've also mentioned CentOS Stream
Yeah.
and Fedora.
Yes.
Yeah, they're positioned a little different. They're upstream RHEL.
Yeah.
Fedora especially. Fedora is a fully community-run distribution.
Yeah.
Great for
So-
a desktop, and Red Hat will pull stuff from that to build the next RHEL.
So
down the road.
if you want the build that is just ahead of RHEL, you want CentOS. If you want to look into
CentOS Stream.
CentOS Stream. If you want to look into the far distant future, you want to look at Fedora, right? Fedora is more like a desktop OS. You can run it as a server, but it's
Absolutely.
geared as a desktop OS. And as it should be, sort of like Ubuntu is kind of geared as a desktop OS, and then there's a server version of it. Fedora is sort of like the desktop that feeds into CentOS. CentOS Stream is then like hardened and whatnot, and then that becomes RHEL. Go ahead, correct me again, Mark.
Fedora. Well, no, essentially yes. The default Fedora is a wonderful graphical workstation, but there are specific
build,
Fedora builds for server.
Yep.
There are Fedora builds that are like the Core OS, the immutable operating system, where it's basically just it's the OS image and it's used as like the container or the underlying OS for like Kubernetes, stuff like that. And Fedora actually, there's tiny versions of it now, I believe, for like Internet of Things and whatnot.
Yep, there's apparently a Pi build for it now too, I think. Yeah,
Yeah.
there is a version for Pi. So we've dwelled a whole bunch on Red Hat as you'd expect us to, right?
Yeah, we're gonna run out of time.
So
So
Welsh lad in the chat had, I think that's how you pronounce that, Welsh lad, whatever, in the chat, who apparently knows a whole lot more about Ubuntu than we do, has enumerated a number of things. One of which is that Ubuntu server is free. Ubuntu LTS is the long-term support, which might be a little more comparable to the target of RHEL. That's also free. And then, of course, if you want support, you just pay Canonical, right? So,
yeah, they'll help you out.
so if you want to learn Linux on Ubuntu, just go grab Ubuntu. If you want to learn Linux on RHEL, there's a couple options. You can get the developer sub, you can get CentOS Stream, you could get Fedora, although Fedora is not going to be guaranteed to be the same as the current release of RHEL. Just keep that in mind. It's a good way to, like, if you want to run that on your desktop so that you're like immersed in RHEL or in Linux, that might be a good way if you intend to run on RHEL. These are all just, right, some various options. He also said that, I assume with the name Lad, it's a he, that person in chat also said that apparently Ubuntu is the most common distribution run on the cloud.
I wouldn't be surprised about that because
I'd be curious where that statistic comes from, because I know things like Amazon don't run RHEL or Ubuntu. They run Amazon Linux, which is surprisingly similar to RHEL.
see here, but here's something I've noticed. Often when you find instructions to set
Yep.
something up on Linux, the default instructions are going to assume you're using Ubuntu.
Yeah, because a
I
lot of
think what this-
hobbyists run Ubuntu, is my take on that.
Right. And I think what's kind of happened is that the folk who have organically been picking Linux up, and Ubuntu is developed with these folk in mind, will grab Ubuntu first, and Ubuntu has sort of won the hearts and minds of the air quote younger developers and folk in the Linux sphere. So that doesn't surprise. It wouldn't surprise me at all that numerically Ubuntu would be possibly the most popular version of Linux if you look across all cloud environments. But again, yeah, I don't know where that number comes from either. And we don't have time to dig into that now. There's another operating system that computer people use.
No, what?
Not open source.
You're right, not open source. What is it, Mark?
It would be that the child of Bill Gates and his minions. Of course, Microsoft Windows, which Microsoft Windows, most people probably have a Windows machine at home.
You think?
But the version of Windows you're running on your desktop is not necessarily the same version of Windows that will be in a data center or in a big company, because Windows has server variants as well, and they have all sorts of other technologies wrapped into them. So if you want to learn IT level, enterprise level Windows, then you've got to get your hands on enterprise level Windows. So what did your research tell us about that, Nate?
So I also want to say that I have found that supporting Windows, although I have not done it in a long time, if you are supporting a current version of Windows and you are running a similarly versioned current version of Windows on your desktop, there are a lot of similarities, right? So
there are, absolutely.
You can learn the UI, you can poke around with PowerShell, you can do a bunch of things, except for the enterprise level services, the Active Directory stuff. If you want to learn that stuff, then you're going to have to get your hands on actual Windows Server. And to do that... Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. And no, I saw that at Merck, because at the beginning of my career at Merck, I did desk side support, which was a mix of Mac OS and at the time Windows NT, which then phased into Windows XP. And even though I had Windows at home, there was stuff that was happening at the enterprise level that I couldn't practice or replicate at home because it was two different, there was a lot of stuff missing from the home versions of Windows. And even if you bought the higher level version for home, you didn't have the enterprise infrastructure in your house to support it. Well, if you did, you were a serious nerd.
Yeah, and some of us might have been in that particular boat. All right. So if you want to run actual Windows Server at home without having to pay, I don't know what a license for Windows servers costs nowadays, but I know it wasn't cheap when I was still working supporting Windows
Similar to RHEL, I
servers.
think.
Um, you can go to Microsoft's website. There's a link in the show notes here. There's actually sort of a free trial where you can run it. I think it's 60 days, but don't quote me on that. It might be 180. It might be more like 30.
Mm.
I used this when I was actually trying to build a demo for a customer once, so I do know that it worked. However, now if you go to their website, it's not as easy to find, and in fact, I wasn't able to find. I was able to find references to free Windows, but I wasn't able to find the download link. Now I spent 10 minutes on this. Hopefully, if you go there, you can find it. However, there's another option, and we're going to talk a little bit about cloud providers later. But Azure, which of course is Microsoft's cloud, Azure. I don't know how to pronounce that because Mark's going to make fun of me now that I can't pronounce Azure properly, right?
No, I'm saying it intentionally
Okay.
stupid. I have no idea.
No, I know. I know that. You can run Windows on Azure using their free credit. You can get a free credit to start with, and we'll talk about that again later. So that might be another way to get it done. You don't even have to have hardware at that point. All you
Get her
need
done.
all you need to do is to set up an account with Azure. I think that requires a credit card, but it doesn't charge you anything until you've exhausted your free trial, right? Also, I have not tested this myself, but some folks have told me that you can run Windows Server. Just go download it just as though you're going to install it with a license key and just don't activate it, and it'll run. You can use that for learning, right? Which may be the same thing as the trial that I used. This is a couple years ago, and it's a little foggy. It doesn't lock exactly. It just nags you. There might be certain features that don't work properly. Maybe if you try to put it online, it does something funny. But if you just need the lab on Windows Server, you could probably do it that way. And I don't know the legality of that. I'd imagine if you're not doing a production workload on the thing, no one's ever going to care or notice.
I would imagine there's enough nagware and crippled stuff if you don't activate with a certain amount of time that, you know, Microsoft probably builds it to to stop people from trying to do that.
Yeah,
And
I'm sure that you will run into limitations when you try to put things like into production on a non-activated Windows server.
Well, how would it know?
Well, I mean, it would know that it's not activated, right?
Yeah, but how would it know you're trying to put things into production?
Right, right. Well, right. That's valid. That's valid. So JSCAR says it looks like it's 180 days. You can run for a few Windows servers. Yes, for 180 days, you can run a few Windows servers. So, right. The magic number may be 180. So the person who told me, I think it was the mentor, told me in our Discord when I asked about it.
Discord!
It's obligatory. I have to hit the button.
Absolutely.
I think 180 sounds like the right number. Maybe he hadn't reached that. Maybe he knows better. If he does, he should hop into chat and tell us so. But anyway, Windows, you can probably run it maybe for up to 180 days without paying for it. After that, I hope you've learned everything you need to start a job.
Now, we've got some more interesting platforms, in my opinion, under that.
Okay.
So now we come to things like your virtualization and your container platforms, because in the enterprise, the bare metal single box server with a single OS on it is becoming something that's less and less common.
Right.
So if you're a hobbyist, you owe it to who wants to break into IT, right? That's the person we're talking to.
Right.
Likes the idea of getting into IT and wants to practice for it, then you're going to want to know virtualization, which is the fine art of breaking one piece of hardware into many smaller machines,
right,
and or containerization,
right,
which is taking applications and putting them into much smaller pieces, and those containers run directly on an OS that supports containers, although once you've got more than a few containers in that situation, it becomes unmanageable. So usually the next step is some sort of container management platform such as Docker Swarm, Kubernetes, or OpenShift. See, I'm trying to be vendor neutral as much as possible. Right. But I did not mention Tanzu. Shit, I just mentioned Tanzu.
Nobody wants to use Tanzu. So I think I just got a message from JSCAR with links to where to go get Windows trial, but I'm not going
Sweet.
to distract the
Later.
podcast by doing that. I'll
Later.
I'll try to get them and throw them
We're,
in. If
we're at the bottom
JSCAR,
of the
if you
hour
wanna,
already.
if you can or cannot, throw them into the chat. Right. So we got a bunch to get through yet. So right, Red Hat OpenShift is one such platform. OpenShift, of course, is a container management platform. It's based on Kubernetes. If you want to get the real, true Red Hat OpenShift experience, you're going to have to get Red Hat OpenShift, which I do not believe we have. We may have trials for, but they're not. There's not like a dev sub like there is for RHEL. Maybe there will be someday. But for this, what you're going to need is an existing account with Red Hat, and you're going to have to ask your account rep for a trial. This assumes that you're not just in the situation of learning, though. This means that you're already working for someone who has an account. So that's not quite valid for the discussion that we're talking about. Mark looks like he's trying to say something. You trying to say something,
Well,
Mark?
so I know we've been talking about free or trial, but if you must stand up OpenShift, you could stand it up in one of the cloud providers,
Yes.
and it might be.
Cheaper.
I don't know if it'll run on free tier, but it could certainly be hourly.
Right.
But, yeah, but that might
However,
not.
the alternative to that is a project called OKD, which you're going to notice that all of the open source software that we talk about today, there's generally an upstream project. Sometimes it has the same name, sometimes it doesn't. In this case, it does not. I forget what OKD stands for, but OKD is the upstream of OpenShift. Now, there was a point when OpenShift 4 was released that OKD and OpenShift were not, like OKD was still at version 3 and OpenShift was at version 4. I think that's been consolidated now. Somebody who knows more about OpenShift can feel free to correct me on that, but I'm pretty sure OKD today, if you were to get it, is the same thing as OpenShift 4, except it's ahead, right? And it's not as stable and yada, yada, yada. Insert all the usual open source disclaimers here.
I actually found something. OpenShift Online has a free tier.
Yes, OpenShift Online is a good way to use OpenShift, not to administer
Absolutely.
OpenShift, right? So if you're a developer
Right.
that wants to learn how to build containers for OpenShift, that's a great way to do it.
Or I would argue that even if you're trying to get into the infrastructure side, it could be super handy to actually see the product that you're going to end
Absolutely.
up working on the infrastructure for.
Absolutely. One of the biggest problems I have with OpenShift is that I do not have experience developing for OpenShift. So even if I could stand it up and make it work, which I don't have hardware to do so on, I don't know what I would do with it. Like, I know about containers, and
Right.
I'm like this, I'm on the cusp, I think, where I could be like, yes, these things I run in containers now run on OpenShift, but I don't have the infrastructure to test that out with. So I'm in this boat right now, right? I don't have OpenShift to run on. I'd love to learn it more. But anyway, there you go. That's OpenShift.
So, right. So if you want to actually see what OpenShift is as a user, you can check it out legit for free.
Right.
Red Hat does the heavy lifting of managing the clustering
Right.
for it. So virtualization is an interesting situation. You have VMware here. I would say that actually the most popular virtualization thing I've seen for hobbyists is something like VirtualBox.
Yeah.
Like the Oracle product.
Yeah. So I didn't really elaborate on all the various. I touched on VMware here, and then I had intended to kind of circle back and talk about things like libvirt, KVM, VirtualBox, things like that.
VMware is the RHEL of virtualization, or the Windows of virtualization. VMware is
it's kind of
the enterprise platform if you're trying to get into it.
Right.
So that is the one to try and learn.
So VMware, I was actually kind of surprised by this. I've always had this opinion that VMware is like the Microsoft of the virtualization world, and they want, or the Oracle of the virtualization world. It seems like they're really not that bad. They have
not as bad as Oracle.
Not as bad. No one's as bad as Oracle, I suppose. But VMware has a surprising number of public demos and trials that you can go to, and I put a link to that to the site where you can do that. It's just vmware.com/tryvmware.html. There's also a bunch of online labs that you can just like tinker with stuff right there, which is you kind of expect, I guess, from a virtualization company, right? So that's kind of cool. There's lots of ways to get that done, at least to tinker with it. And I think this is still true. However, I wasn't able to get my hands on it. there used to be, and I think there still is, right? The VMware hypervisor is VMware ESX or ESXi. There was a point where it was free. You could just go get ESXi, run it on a machine, and run VMs on it. The thing that was not free was vCenter or vSphere, which is the thing that makes it clusterable, right? So in order to do that, you had to go buy it, right? I do not know if they still have that platform. I wasn't able to validate it. I found lots of information that said yes, it still exists, but I wasn't able to find it on their website. So
Yeah,
maybe it's still there.
at least they have their VMware Workstation Player, which is good for running a single virtual machine, and that can be used for free for non-commercial use. But that won't really help you with the enterprise level VMware stuff, you know?
Yeah, so ESXi, the nice thing about it is it has all the features that you would be managing with vSphere minus the clustering, right? So how do I set up a vSwitch? How do I set up a VLAN? How do I just run a VM? How do I set up storage? That's all stuff you're going to have to do in ESXi the same way that you would in vCenter or vSphere, right? Sorry.
Right. Plenty to learn.
Yeah. Right, and
without
these
needing without needing to manage multiple clusters.
Right, and then what you will find is that when you are working in a job that runs vSphere or vCenter, all of the terminology is already familiar to you. You just have to learn how to do it with the clustering piece, right? So, which is different. Don't get me wrong. It's not like one for one, but you have the basic underlying knowledge already, which is great.
It's not that bad.
Right. So, let's see here. And like I said, there's lots of alternatives. We talked about VirtualBox. We talked about VMware Player. libvirt with KVM on top of pretty much any Linux distro nowadays. You can virtualize and learn some of the techniques you would use for virtualization. It just won't be the same terminology and the same interface that you would get with VMware for free on top of that. RHEL or CentOS with the web console has a very nice management console for virtualization.
That's how I manage my home lab 99%. There's a couple of virtualization tasks you still need to drop the command line for, but most day-to-day stuff you can do with the web UI.
Right. So, all right, so there's lots of other options for containerization and virtualization. Again, I didn't touch on all of them. I kind of touched on some of the big names. There's Kubernetes itself, if you don't want to do it with OpenShift. There's Docker Swarm. Is Docker Swarm still alive anymore? I think it is.
I presume it is. I'm just trying to be polite and mentioning it. I have no idea.
There's also just the base level Docker and Podman, right? And are there other container runtimes nowadays? There was Rancher, was it? Rancher was another one? No, Rancher is another management platform. Anyway, there's a bunch of options out there. Let's see here. All right, so industry software, I touched on 2. There are 1.5 billion that I could have touched on. One of them is one that we mentioned earlier on, and that's Red Hat Satellite. I only bring this up because if you're going to be running a large RHEL infrastructure, you're probably going to want to know Satellite so that you can manage that infrastructure, right? There's also things like Ansible Tower, which I didn't, not Tower, it's automation platform now, which I didn't put in here, which I should have. I'll probably add some links for that. But first, let's finish talking about Satellite. Satellite is included with most RHEL subscriptions. It's not included with the RHEL development subscription, which is kind of unfortunate, but I guess I can understand why it's like that. That's mainly for developers, right? Not for like having to manage a large fleet. But the good news is, as you could expect, there's an upstream project called Katello. Katello and Foreman, essentially, are the 2 major projects that come together to make Satellite. If you run the Katello project, you basically have Satellite with a different UI and less stable code base.
Not as many features. And for those of you who are like, well, what the heck does Satellite do? What's Nate mean by manage? Satellite's biggest job is to essentially provide a way to manage patching for systems. It also will let you deploy systems from bare metal, from templating, and it will let you run. You can also deploy arbitrary remote execution jobs across your fleet using Bash, using Ansible, and we're kind of deprecating Puppet, but for a long time Puppet was the config management piece of it.
Yep. You might call it a lifecycle management tool. I think that's the right industry term for this.
Yeah. But 99% of the use cases with satellite revolve around patching.
Right. Let's see. The next is the big behemoth, Oracle. Their site suggests that there are trials available for the Oracle database, but I think it requires that you talk to an account rep
Honeypot!
or use their cloud.
Honeypot!
Right. So I'm thinking if you talk to an account rep, they're going to try to push you into buying Oracle. But using their cloud, I don't know. If there's a free tier on their cloud, maybe you can learn Oracle there. To be honest, I feel like Oracle is the sort of thing that you're going to be getting specialized training on. This isn't the kind of thing that I would expect people to just dive into and learn for fun. And I think that seems to be the way Oracle wants it. So I don't know what to tell you here.
Now, if you want to learn database stuff in general, there are plenty of open source SQL databases that you can learn SQL and how to manage what's essentially in an enterprise an Oracle database.
Right.
So you don't necessarily need to buy Oracle or attract their attention to learn how to manage SQL databases. There's MySQL, there's PostgreSQL. There's options out there, and I think both those projects are still alive, right?
Yeah, so MariaDB, so MySQL was purchased by Oracle because they had totally good reasons to do so. However, the core, I think if the story went, I think that the core developer...
Was that the split that led to Maria?
Yes, the core developer basically said...
Maria!
He flipped his...
just met a database named Maria!
The story that I got is that he flipped his desk and walked out. He probably didn't. But he basically spun off his own... He forked the source for MySQL, which is exactly what you can do with an open source project, before Oracle got their claws into it. And he created MariaDB, which I believe is named after his daughter, or maybe his wife. I think it's his daughter. Which is kind of a cool way to name software, I suppose.
You know what? If Oracle ever bought Red Hat, I'd totally flip the table.
Yeah, right.
Not even metaphorically.
Yeah, just... So anyway, there's MariaDB, Postgres... I don't know how to pronounce this. PostgreSQL, PostgreSQL, that thing with the P and the SQL at the end. Yeah, PostgreSQL. There you go. That does still exist. It's very much still in use. In fact, it's a piece of satellite. So it's obviously it's behind a lot of things that you probably don't even know it's back there. But that's another. Some people say that's an open source competitor to Oracle. Like that's how enterprise ready it is, right? So. There you go.
Fantastic.
And that's completely free. There's no company behind that, as far as I know. You can buy support from, what is it, Crunchy Data?
I don't know. So it's a project, not a product.
Right. It's a project, not a product. Right. And, of course, there's lots of other database things, but we're not going to talk too much about those because we are already 45 minutes into this. I thought this was going to be like one of these softball things that we're done in 15 minutes.
Dude, we have opinions.
We do have opinions. All right, so the last category we have are software as a service solutions and cloud providers, right? I just lumped them into one because they're kind of similar. You've got the big behemoth, Amazon Web Services, AWS. They have a free tier available. If you sign up with a new email address that they don't know about and have not already granted the free tier to, I believe you get a whole year of free tier level services, right? There's basically, I'll use EC2 as an example. Their bottom tier machine on EC2 is free tier capable. I believe there are both Windows and Linux variants of that, but don't hold me to the Windows side, where you can just spin the thing up, run it as many hours as you want within their cloud, and you get that free for a year, which is a great way to go and learn how their interface works and how to work with Amazon. And
then you pay?
Well, no. You will pay at the end of a year. Not like you pay for the year you used, but you will pay...
I know, I understand that.
Yeah. So the thing you want to be careful of is leveraging free tier on any of these providers and getting hooked to the point where you can't leave. Then at the end of the year, you get hit with a $10,000 bill every month, right? Yeah. Mark is mimicking that he's been hooked by a finger fish hook.
Right. Yeah. Ah, well, and that's the thing about software as a service, right? It
Yeah,
is,
yeah,
and you could say the same thing about the fact that I pay Apple. What is it, like $10 a month for Apple Music?
yeah.
And if I ever stop that, I'll lose access to like all the a lot of the songs on my
Oh
phone.
yeah, yeah. I'm the
But
same
it's
way with
just so
Spotify, right? Like I'm so used to it,
it's
I just
so
pay for it.
friggin' nice,
Yeah. Um,
right?
but the other thing to consider with these cloud providers is that not only can you learn the service itself for free, you can learn the operating systems that you're using
They're
on them for
hosting.
free, right? So Amazon Linux is a whole lot
Yeah,
like RHEL and CentOS. It feels a whole lot. You might even say that it's
it's
just
a
a clone.
it's a no, it's a downstream rebuild.
Yeah, I guess that's what I meant.
It's a it it's a down it's legit. It's
It's
open
a yeah,
source.
no,
It's a
no.
downstream
Yeah, I know
rebuild.
that. I know that. I'm not saying they did anything nefarious. I'm saying that that's probably what they did. They forked RHEL or
Yeah.
CentOS or something, and now they've got Amazon Linux. But it's a great way to just like get familiar with the command line and do things, right? The next cloud provider is Google
Do
Compute
things.
Cloud, GCP. Same deal. Well, not the same deal. Same deal as the same
You down
sentiment
with
there.
GCP?
But there
Yeah, you know
is.
me. You down with GCP?
It looks
Yeah,
like
you
you can
know
get.
me.
If Mark would stop singing, it looks like you can get a $300 credit, but I think it's time limited if I remember correctly. But you get a $300 credit to run on Google Compute Cloud GCP. You down with GCP? Yeah, go ahead, sing it again. So that's enough.
I
That's
can hand over heart. I've never used GCP,
neither have
at
I.
least not directly.
Neither have I.
I
So
assume we're using it when we use like the Google Apps and shit,
yeah,
but I've never actually
I've never
looked at
administered a
their.
thing on it.
I've
I don't.
Yeah, I've never used any of their EC2
I don't
equivalent
know if you
things.
turn it on and you get a Linux prompt, or if you have some sort of a container based thing, because that supposedly that's where
No
Kubernetes
clue.
came from GCP. So
Absolutely,
you know,
the work
I
the work done
know
at Google.
I know Ed Scotus runs the Holiday Hack Challenge on top of Google Compute.
Oh,
Because
he does. That's right.
yeah,
He's talked
so
about it.
you know, I don't know exactly what that
I'm
looks
not
like.
saying they're bad. I'm just saying
No,
I've never used it.
I
Like
agree.
I've been on Amazon's console. I've been on Azure's console,
Yeah,
and
what I don't know is what you get for that $300 credit, right? Like what kind of experience are you going to get? But if you're going to be working for a place that uses it, whatever experience you get is going to be valuable.
yeah.
Then there's Azure. You also can get a
Azure.
$200 credit there, but it only lasts for 30 days. Effectively, this is a 30-day trial, right? Because I like
That's
if you
right.
use up a $200 credit in less than 30 days, you're doing it right.
Or 30
That's all I'm
days.
saying. Yeah, $200 or 30 days is basically what you get, or $200 then 30 days or $200. Yeah. Anyway,
Don't think too hard, man. Your head's
once
gonna pop.
once one or the other is exhausted, your trial is over. So if you spend your $200 in one day, you're done. But
Mining
yeah,
Bitcoin or some shit like
right,
that.
and that's probably why it's there. Then there's also smaller providers like DigitalOcean. They've got a 60-day, $100 trial. I can tell you that $100 on DigitalOcean can easily get you past 60 days because they are well priced. I think I use them myself. You know, I really should have reached out to all these providers and gotten trial codes. I just thought of that. That would have been the
You mean the
sneaky.
giveaway on the show?
That would have been the sneaky make Iron Sysadmin money way.
Yeah,
But I didn't do that, folks. These are all just links. All right. Then there's Linode, which I know supports a ton of podcasts like us. You can probably find a cool promotion code for some podcasts that you like. You can get a $100
Yeah.
credit there. Maybe some of them are for more. I don't know. But you can go right to their website and get a $100 credit.
They always have. I check them out. They have a bunch of promotions that
Yeah.
apparently cycle fairly regularly.
I've kind of always wanted to try out Linode because they seem like
well, they sound like Linux.
well, they are. That's what they are. They're basically a Linux cloud provider. But I've always wanted to try them out. They seem like they're cool. They seem like they get it. Is what I'm
They
getting
seem
at.
like they're not evil like Amazon.
They seem like they're not evil like Amazon. Although DigitalOcean has proven to not be too evil, so you know I don't mind them.
Well, they're calm and soothing like the ocean.
They're calm and soothing like and they have a whale in their stuff. We have one left. We have one left on the list here, Mark. One. I know we're losing you.
I was just doing the whale song.
The last one is GitHub, and I included it because you might think GitHub is free, but
I've never paid him a dime.
Well, there's an enterprise tier, right? However,
all right, what would
to
that
simply
get me?
use GitHub, right, and push and pull code and contribute to projects and have an account and have private and public repos, that's all free. So go use it. A lot of development teams use something similar to GitHub, if not directly GitHub. You won't get the like on-site private repos that you can get if you have enterprise. I did put a link to the enterprise stuff so you can see what you get differently, but I'm going to recommend that if you're going to be a developer, or honestly, at this point, even someone managing infrastructure, you're going to want to be familiar with Git. And a good way to do that is to interact with GitHub, right? So
it's a good skill.
Yeah, it is a good skill. I mean, if you're in infrastructure management and you're writing Ansible code, you're probably going to work with Git. It's just all there is to it. It's version. You can version control it the same way that you're going to version control some
infrastructure as code.
Infrastructure is code.
Magic words in all the clouds.
Magic words. And folks, that's the list. We probably missed a ton of things. The idea here was to give you a starting point, right? Once you've been through a couple of these things, you're going to be able to figure out how to go and find demos and trials of your own. I hope that these things have sort of spurred off like, hey, I'd really love to learn that thing that they just talked about. And if you do, go check it out in the show notes. If we don't have a link in there, check us out, or I should say contact us via either Twitter or join our Discord community. Discord! And we can talk about it there. Personally, I believe the best way to get into IT and learn these things is to just get in there and get dirty. Get your hands on these things, try them out, figure out how they work.
Do the thing.
Do the thing.
Do the thing some more.
Don't read about the thing. Don't just read about the thing.
Keep doing the thing.
Do the thing. Do the thing over and over again, and you will eventually learn it. I feel like I've talked a whole lot this part.
You did, but it's okay.
I'm almost out of... I don't want to call it a white. It's a white Ukrainian. I don't know if there's a different...
Yes.
Is there a different drink called a white Ukrainian that I just trampled all over? It's a white Russian.
I have no idea.
I don't want to say Russian. Anyway.
Don't be like that.
Don't be like what? Don't talk about Russia?
We don't talk about
I knew it. I knew it. All right, folks. So that concludes part 1 of the show. We hope...
It's not like it was a white Putin. He's the one you don't want to talk about.
White Putin. Yeah, I guess the Russians themselves aren't so bad. It's the guy leading them.
Right.
Why don't they just turn over their government or something?
It's because it's hard.
The Russians are watching us now.
Yeah, good.
Hi. Totally.
Das Vidanya.
Sorry.
Well, I don't know what I just said. It was something right. Is Das Vidanya goodbye?
I have no idea. I've heard it. I don't know what it means. Anyway, folks, that'll end the first part of the show. We're going to go to a break. If you are listening to the first part of the show and you want to hear us banter about stuff we're doing and kind of the news, you should tune in to part B of the show. If we don't see you in part B, then thank you for listening to part A. If you want to support the show, check us out on patreon.com/ironsysadmin. You can buy shirts at Teespring. It's down here somewhere, teespring.com/
hear about this all
where's
again
the stupid... You are. But if you've only listened to part A, I want you to hear it because it's important. This is how you support the show, Mark. Don't you want people to support the show? Teespring.com/stores/ironsysadmin. Check us out on the social medias. You can find the Iron Sysadmin podcast. You're a smart person. I have faith in you, and we're going to go to a break.
Do the thing!
I need to find the button.
The button, Frank?
It's here somewhere. Here it is. Nope. No, here it is. All right. We're going.
Push the button.
Are you a fan of the Iron Sysadmin podcast? If you are, don't forget you can support the show via Patreon at patreon.com/ironsysadmin. Or you can buy merchandise at teespring.com/stores/ironsysadmin. And thank you. Are you a fan of the Iron Sysadmin podcast? If you are, don't forget you can support the show via Patreon at patreon.com/ironsysadmin. Or you can buy merchandise at teespring.com/stores/ironsysadmin. And thank you. That was fun.
The intro?
I mean,
Or you mean part one?
the first part of the show.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So, welcome to part
Fun
B.
for the whole family.
Welcome to part B of episode 121. If you want to listen to part A, go look at the previous episode. We talked all about finding trials and demos of software you might want to learn, or open source thing that we do, all open source alternatives to various software that might help you from a learning perspective. The focus was not about, how to replace these things or how to not pay for software. It was more about how to learn software that you might want to learn to get into the industry. Though we did kind of touch on software piracy, just because it's a thing, right? It's a real thing. And it might be a way for people who truly can't. Don't pirate software. It's bad.
Don't copy that floppy.
Don't copy that floppy. I'll call the software piracy
Would you
agency
download
on
a car, Nate?
Would you
download a car? Yeah, actually, I would.
I probably would download a car. If it literally costs nothing to replicate that car by downloading it, I might.
Yeah.
Software piracy is a victimless crime, isn't it? Anyway. Right. So here we are. Here we are in part B, where we're going to talk about our announcements. And the first of those announcements, as always, is thank you to all of our patrons. You guys are awesome, or you folks are awesome. There could be gals in there, I'm not sure.
You nerds. You
nerds are awesome. So,
I know at least one. We've got at least one lady patron.
Indeed. So I want to say thank you
because we know her
to Zed Thor, Name Pending 197, Jeremy, Aranami, Andrew, Tatro, Bruce, Robert, Matt, David, Solemn, Trooper-ish, Linux, Sys666. I wish he'd change his name. It's so hard to say. Mark with a K, The Mentor, Mark with a C, Julius, Andy J, Charles, and 22532.
And I'm thinking of him as Jeremy because he's got the little thingies.
Yeah, right. I said it that way for a while, just to be funny. It could be true. I don't know.
Nate's going to be helping host Rel Presents.
That's a great way to deliver that, Mark, as I was typing it. I left myself a little note while we were doing the first part of the presentation. So you guys remember Eric? He was on the show a little while ago. Eric the IT guy. He runs a show called Rel Presents. I was on it as a guest the one time. And, he and I have chatted quite a bit. Well, his normal co-host is going to be out for a little while. Not like a long while. It's just that there's going to be several episodes in the next coming months where he's going to be out. So he asked me to help co-host. So as those episodes come up, I'll let you guys know if you want to go watch them. But it should be a good time.
Now, that is a Red Hat podcast.
That is a Red Hat podcast. So that's kind of cool.
So you are going to be paid very well, I might add, to podcast. I mean, because you're going to be doing that as part of your job.
Technically, yeah, I guess you're right.
There's no time. Are you doing it during business hours?
It'll be during business hours for a Red Hat
Dude,
podcast. So
there's-
yeah, sure, I'll be being paid to
Yeah,
podcast.
it's not even technical.
Yeah.
You've arrived. You've arrived. Yay!
Okay, we'll go with
Kermit
that.
the Frog cheer.
We'll go with that.
Yay!
Except, you know, the whole like I'm paid to be a TAM, not paid to podcast. Like if podcast is in my
You-
title, that would be amazing.
Okay. You're being paid to do whatever you're doing during work hours.
Yeah,
So the fact
yeah.
that and that's how cool we are that you'll it's a hobby job, right?
Yeah.
But you're still
Yeah.
it's still on the company dime and you're still helping the company out. So that's excellent. Very pleased for you.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be cool.
I'm sure you'll do a great job.
Yeah, so that'll be fun. Like I said, I'll let you guys know what episodes those are when they air. If I can, I'll let you know before they air. I know one's coming up.
I'll try to watch them live so that I can harass you.
Might actually be next week on Wednesday. It is during work hours though. I'll try to. I will undoubtedly
Yeah.
share a link via our usual social stuff for folks that want to watch it. So it'll be there.
I'm definitely going to cancel any meetings that conflict with it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Definitely,
right.
absolutely.
Screw you one-on-one time with my staff. I'm watching Nate.
You staff people, you can wait. This is important.
Friggin' wait. I'm gonna drop your one-on-ones. Yeah.
All right.
No,
All right.
I don't do that. I might
No.
move one if I have to, but I won't drop it.
All right. So, as I mentioned in the first part of the show, if you want to support the show, you can do so. Well, we cover up on Patreon at the end of the show. But if you want to buy a T-shirt or something, go check us out on
Teespring.
teespring.com/storage/Iron Sysadmin.
And Teespring is TEE spring, not
Yeah.
just the letter T in spring.
That's valid.
No,
There's
I'm saying it.
Yeah,
'cause,
yeah.
you know.
There's a link. There's a link in the notes. There's a link on our site. If you can't find Teespring, I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you.
No, don't be sorry.
Right. We don't have any new reviews. If you guys want to leave us reviews, do that. If you think we missed your review, let us know. We do like to read them on the air.
We do.
We like reviews because we like to know that you like what we're doing or don't like what we're doing and what it is you don't like, so we can change it. Unless it's Uncle Mark singing, that's not going to change. Sorry.
That's tough shit.
Sorry, that one guy that didn't like Iron or that didn't like Mark singing.
Maybe we've won him over by now.
Perhaps if you're still listening,
Unlikely.
let us know. Did we convert you, or
Let
did
us
you just
know. Let us know.
Or
Are
do
you
you
hating
just-
your life now?
did you just mute Uncle Mark? Like, do you just mute the show when Uncle Mark starts singing?
It wasn't just my singing. The guy legit didn't like me.
Yeah,
he thought
he
I
just
brought
didn't like
nothing
you.
to the show.
Yeah,
It was very hurtful.
he's wrong.
Anyway,
is,
hi.
is there like a helicopter running behind you?
No,
Or
that's
is it
the
your
dryer.
dryer again? Do you always do
dryer.
laundry on Thursday nights?
My wife is in charge of laundry. I get no vote.
Okay,
None.
sounds like you have a V8 idling behind you. That's okay. I can live with that. I can live with that. I like V8s. All right. I think that's all the announcements. We have Chad to talk about now. Mark,
Yeah,
what
I
have you
guess
been
we do.
doing? Let me guess. You've been questing for the Elden Ring thing.
So the
is that like
quest
the
is to
One
become
Ring?
no, the Elden Ring is shattered. You're trying to become Elden Lord.
Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, Elden Ring is my current game of choice. I have a couple of things lined up to play other than that, which I've pretty much ignored. I bought a game that was on sale on my PlayStation the other night. It's very Lovecraft themed. I like Lovecraft, and I haven't friggin' touched it because I'm basically Elden Ring's bitch right now.
You're just hung up on the Elden Ring.
So actually, Elden Ring has become my new Skyrim. I don't know if I mentioned this last show, but I bought the Windows version too. So I now own Elden Ring on 2 platforms. Not one platform, 2 platforms. I've discovered so I've used multiplayer in it already by summoning random folk to help me fight bosses. But there are several Red Hatters who play, including you.
Mm-hmm.
And some of these Red Hatters, I've actually done like extended Elden Ring sessions with them, where we've had a lot of fun. Actually, on my YouTube channel, I streamed my session with Brandon the SA the other night, where he was helping me out, and we actually took out Godric, the second boss in the game in the castle. It was a lot. So the multiplayer is fun because, and you might not agree with this statement that it makes it fun because of this, whenever you're in co-op, you open yourself up to be invaded by PvPers, and it happens with us. It happened on a fairly regular basis, and well, it can disrupt what you're doing. Worst case, the invader kills you and you have to respawn at the last site of grace. Best case, you kill the invader, you get some bonus stuff. It really it mixes it up and it's very thematic. It goes along with the Dark World because there's NPC invaders at certain points. So having player characters invade just kind of it really adds to the fun of the game.
Hmm.
I know. I'm not the guy who's ever really liked non-consensual PvP in games,
Yeah.
but for some reason in Elden Ring it just friggin' works.
Hmm.
It doesn't. I don't fly into a rage even when I die. I'm not like, oh, this dick's invading me. It's like, oh, we're being invaded. How are you going to deal with it?
So I mean,
it's actually
part of that
it's
is
actually kind of fun.
part of that is how the game deals with death, right? Elden Ring isn't that penalizing when you die.
It. I would say, yeah, okay. So yes and no. You can die very quickly by being stupid. Um, when you die, you drop any runes you've collected, and if you don't get those runes back, that's actual lost progress.
Yeah.
But unless you die again, you'll get your runes back, and uh, it's usually fairly straightforward to get them back. Now it might be that you fought through a big group of enemies, you die, you respawn, those enemies that you killed have respawned, your runes are on the other side of them. Getting through them might be a challenge, but them's the breaks. But most of the time, yes, the table stakes for dying are fairly low.
Yeah.
Now I have lost I don't even want to know how many runes I've lost. I've lost probably hundreds of thousands at this point, just because I'm sometimes a very stubborn man.
Never.
But I've definitely lost runes. But again, the invaders, for some reason, whatever reason, they don't bug me. The other fun thing I'm doing with Elden Ring, and I dropped the link to the guy's page in the show notes. Uh, there's a VR mod that was released last week that now supports Elden Ring. You can basically play the game in virtual reality. Now it doesn't use the VR controllers. You still use the regular game controller, but that's fine because Elden Ring is a controller game as far as I'm concerned. That's really what you want to be doing. But this same mod also works for Cyberpunk. It works for Red Dead Redemption 2. It works for a couple of games. So I got to try those games out in VR now. But for a game that was not developed to be played in VR, it's actually pretty freaking amazing to put the headset on and to be in the lands between looking around and like, wow, that's even more impressive. The only drawback to the VR is you can't play online when you're running mods. So when you launch the game now, I get a dialog box. Do I want to be in VR mode, which is offline, or do I want to be regular online mode? But you can't have both because if they let you run mods when you're online, it would be far too easy to cheat. And I'm sure there are
Yeah,
people
that
who
makes
figured
sense.
out how to cheat anyway,
Yeah.
but whatever. So that's Elden Ring. And so you and I got to play some Elden Ring together.
Yeah,
Multiplayer.
we'll have to get together and play some at some point.
Yeah. Not this weekend, scout outing, maybe sometime next week. We'll
Yeah.
see.
Yeah.
I'm still waiting on my Steam Deck email. In fact, let me check. Nope, no Steam Deck email yet. Looking forward to trying to get that. And then this is something interesting. I actually just got the email that I was approved, and I have a mentee now, or what they call a protege. There was an email sent last week from our vice president of our group, and Red Hat has teamed up with this company ACP to look for mentors for military veterans. They're
Oh.
folk who are either ex-military or who are transitioning out of the military, and they're looking to be mentored for how to get a job, or if they're in a job, how to navigate corporate America, stuff like that. So I'll be mentoring an Air Force veteran who has spent 20 years serving our country. he's going to be out soon, and he's done work with networking and stuff, and he wants to get into the civilian world. So I'm actually kind of looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a good way to give back,
Pretty cool.
and hopefully I can give him a little bit of wisdom and advice.
Yeah, right?
That
Hopefully.
at least I'll amuse him along the way, I'm sure.
At least you'll amuse him.
Yeah.
That's valid.
And,
That's valid.
and then I'm about to be able to like hopefully I'm waiting on like some final approvals, but hopefully I'll be able to hire some new TAMs on my team. This is gonna be a first for me doing running the whole job search, interviewing the candidates, picking the candidate. So if you want to work for Uncle Mark at Red Hat, possibly as an OpenShift TAM, we'll share those job recs once I have them. So if you're listening and you're like, I want to be a Red Hatter, you might have a chance. We'll see.
Cool. Yeah, there you go. You could go.
But that's what I got going on.
Go work for Uncle Mark.
I'm fun.
Yeah, just imagine working for this guy.
I'm told my people seem to like me. I've gotten some good feedback so far.
That's good. Good to hear. All right, so what am I have this weird problem where it's like I buy
so many.
I buy a brand new game, and then for some reason, I don't know why, but for some reason, I get an interest in a game I already owned and go back to it and play it. So I bought Elden Ring, started playing it, and then something drew me into Cyberpunk, which is a game that I also purchased new, started playing, and got distracted by something else. I forget what it was, but there was some other game I got distracted by and went back to playing that, right? So it's like this weird cycle.
I think what happened, Nate, is that if I have the timing right, I was talking about the VR mod that was coming, and I mentioned Cyberpunk.
You mentioned Cyberpunk, and that reminded me, like, I never really gave
Cyberpunk.
I never really gave it a good go. I never even got past the first act. Well, now I have. I played to the point where you meet the guy who I'm pretty sure is played by Keanu Reeves. If not, he's very heavily styled after Keanu Reeves.
He is played by Keanu Reeves.
Yeah,
He's
okay.
absolute that 100%. Keanu Reeves was part of it. Yeah, I believe his name's Johnny.
I think it's Johnny.
So you did the thing where you were in the helicopter and cleared the rooftop
and you take a bullet to the brain and then you come back and you get Johnny in your head. Yeah, that's how far I am. I'm just past that.
Okay.
So yeah, that's what I've been playing. And to be honest, right, when I remember a couple months ago, I got like really into Valheim and I was playing it like every spare minute. That's not what I'm doing here, because we have too much going on because now it's summertime. When I got into Valheim, it was winter and there's just like nothing to do in the winter. So you're not going to see me fly through this like I did Valheim, but it's definitely enjoyable and it's fun. And the other thing I wanted to mention was I always talk about these Stadia controllers, right? How I said, like, oh, I bought Stadia, it kind of flopped, but the controllers are really nice. Well, they're not like universal, easy to use, plug in, Windows recognizes them as a game controller controllers, right? Like they're designed to work through the UI that is Stadia's web thing, right? There's like some driver in there that makes these things work. So I found that games that account for them and specifically have support for them, they work fine in. Other games, they're just not even recognized as a controller, which kind of sucked. Because they're nice controllers. They are really nice. I know I've talked about them a lot, but they are solid. I've seen lots of other people agree with me. They are very nice controllers.
Not arguing they're good controllers. I will continue to mock Google for abandoning stuff.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. Like that Stadia is, I don't want to say it's dead, but it's dying. It's gonna die. It's gonna go away.
It's dead. It's dead. He's dead, Jim.
Well, like today, you can still go play Stadia today, but I think it's gonna go
away. Are you
away.
Still paying for it?
No, I stopped paying for it like 2 years ago. That's how long ago this is, right?
Peace out, Stadia.
But and again, I still hold that it was a fun platform. It's just too many people complained about the streaming nature and whatever. Anyway, my point is, I found both it's not quite a driver, but it is kind of a driver, and a little shim application that you run on your Windows machine, and it emulates whatever it is that makes Stadia work with the Stadia controller, and passes it on as a game controller. So I can now use my Stadia controllers with any game that supports a game controller. So I'm happy about that. Now, because the other thing I have is PlayStation 3 controllers, which are very nice. I like PlayStation 3 controllers, but they're getting old and they feel, I don't know how to describe it. They feel old, right? They don't respond as well as they used to. The joysticks are a little loose, that kind of thing. The Stadia controller is practically new because it doesn't have a whole lot of game time on it. So if you have Stadia controllers and you want to know how to do the thing that I just described, there's 2 links in this part of the show notes in my chat section here. There's one to a GitHub. There's both GitHub repos. One of them is for the little driver thing, and the other is for the shim application. Literally, you install the driver thing, you run the shim application, you plug in your Stadia controller, and you have a game controller. You're done. Goes. I'm relatively sure they have not started crypto mining me or anything. So, good stuff.
Good deal. Yeah. Why is my processor spiking from the shim?
Yeah, the shim is actually a crypto miner.
If it were a crypto miner, you would have CPU load. Otherwise, it would be the worst crypto miner ever.
Yeah, right. It actually mines like fractions and fractions and fractions of bitcoins per month because it hides itself so
It's
well
too
that
polite.
it doesn't use any CPU.
It's the ridiculously polite malware.
Yes, the ridiculously polite malware. All right, I realized that while we were away, I didn't open up the news articles, and we're about to go into the news. So
okay. There
like sing or something, Mark, while I get these open.
Open news, open news. So the first 2 news articles are essentially Red Hat flavored.
Yeah. One of them is just one of them is literally RHEL 8.6 is now out. RHEL 9 is soon. TM.
Yeah.
That was announced at Summit. The date was not announced at Summit. However, there was reference to the coming weeks. So you should see RHEL 9 soon. TM. Did you have more to say about RHEL 8.6 or RHEL 9?
I'm actually looking at RHEL 8.6. Pretty interesting.
Yeah. There's some changes to Ansible.
Some interesting stuff in the with the virtualization and the web console, the pass-through stuff. Yeah, it looks like the web console got quite a bit of love, actually.
You know what we forgot to do?
No, what did we forget? What did we do? There you go.
And I didn't want to tell you, but I also forgot to start recording in Riverside. So
how screwed are we now?
Well, I have the recording both of the stream and on my mixer. So assuming we can get through the rest of the show without any dropouts, we're fine.
Oh, that's good. So I did find an article at crn.com, and they claim they have 40 years as the voice of the channel, so they're like clearly some sort of industry thing.
The channel.
But it's essentially the the 10 big announcements from Red Hat Summit 2022. So if you want to just glance through some of the announcements Red Hat made at Summit, there's the article there.
Why is it trying to get me to install Google Widevine? What the hell is Google Widevine?
What the hell are you talking about?
This application or this website when I went to it.
CRN? Well, are you running Brave? Because it did nothing.
Brave came up and it said crn.com is asking you to install and run Google Widevine.
Well, I got no such message, so
we're gonna block that. Goodbye. We're not gonna do that.
All right. sorry I used a sketchy website. I guess.
What the hell is that? I love how they have this picture of God knows what Red Hat building with the old Red Hat logo on it.
Oh, I see you put an article up about our favorite thing.
Our favorite. Oh yes, our favorite thing.
The metaverse.
The metaverse.
The so-called metaverse. Metaverse. Them's fighting words.
So this is from the BBC. So trust it more.
So you have to read it in the proper accent than CRN.
I don't know if I can do the accent. And the title
Apple's
is
iPod creator has warned the so-called metaverse risks creating more trolls and damaging human interaction.
there you go. So why they had to call out the Apple iPod creator is beyond me. I guess
Because
it just lends
he is street cred.
credibility to the article. It has nothing to do with the iPod. But the Apple iPod creator warns the metaverse will encourage trolls. I'm surprised.
Abso-fucking-lutely.
Are you surprised? I am
No.
totally shocked. I thought the metaverse was going to be sunshine and roses.
And trolls.
And trolls. Sunshine, roses, trolls, little kids screaming. Just all the bad things. All the bad things that you have encountered in all of your online video conferences since the beginning of the pandemic, plus assholes and trolls. Anyway, the article basically suggests that technology is eroding people's interaction. And the metaverse is just sort of the next phase in that, right? I don't disagree. Do you disagree? I feel like this is exactly what has been nagging at me for quite a long time, and that is that face-to-face interaction has, well, it has a different feel to it. And of course, you live by a different set of rules because the person you're talking to could punch you in the face.
Yeah.
You know, like the stuff you see people talk, the stuff you see people tell each other online, or the insults that people sling at each other online, would turn into fistfights in the real world. And I guarantee these people would not be slinging this stuff around if there were fists nearby, like real fists.
You definitely interact different when there's consequences.
Yeah.
So I think one thing that people disregard is that used properly, technology can level the field in terms of overcoming prejudice. Because if you're a digital avatar, and especially if you can use software to modify your voice,
Yeah.
suddenly being concerned about like, think about it in World of Warcraft, right? Or other MMOs, where if you roll a female avatar, sometimes you're harassed because a bunch of thirsty nerds think you're going to be their girlfriend,
Right.
like in real life.
Right.
So I knew more than one female gamer who would always roll a male character, so that wouldn't be an issue.
Mm-hmm.
So like it or not, sometimes it's good to use technology to mask who you are in the real world, to eliminate real world prejudice or bias, right? Because bias is a thing, whether we want to admit it or not. I'm a father of daughters, so are you. And I'll admit, I want my girls to have the same opportunities that they would as if they were guys. And that's not always going to be the case, especially in like Abigail she's a chemist, right? She studied chemistry. She's probably going to be in some sort of scientific thing, and that's traditionally a male-dominated field. And for those of you who are rolling your eyes and being like, "Oh, he's being all politically correct, blah blah blah, quotas, blah blah blah," no, the reality is humans tend to have biases whether we acknowledge them or not. And if technology can be used to eliminate biases, even if it leads to a certain level of anonymous interaction, I think that can be valuable. The Apple guy fixates on looking into people's eyes. I get that, right? But you can simulate that experience enough to fool your brain in virtual reality. You really can.
Absolutely. I mean, I've done a ton of research, and just I know it has that negative connotation, right? I've watched a lot of YouTube videos too, right? But I've watched a lot of videos of folks who have done hundreds of hours in virtual reality, right? Folks who you might consider to be experts on what will be the metaverse, right? And they say that there's this concept of phantom touch, for example, right? When you touch a thing, in virtual reality, your body sort of makes you believe it, or when something touches you, right?
Yeah.
There can certainly be that level of interaction and chemistry in virtual avatars. And to your point, you can be anything you want to be. You can be a dog in virtual reality, right? On the internet, no one knows you're a dog. Well, in virtual
I'm
reality,
here
no one
now. I'm
knows the
not a
dog
cat.
is, yeah. Um, so I think the world we're looking at, the world we could be going into with virtual spaces becoming like real spaces, um, could be great. I think it won't be. That's the pessimist in me, I suppose.
I
I think
think it's
it's I think it's gonna be the same problems we see on social media. It's gonna be people are assholes. They're gonna be assholes when they're anonymous, and all of the folks running these different quote unquote metaverses are going to try to rein that in with censorship and with blocking and with guidelines and rules, and it's going to turn into the not reality that social media is. Do you know what I mean by not reality? It's not real. It's not like being face to face, because when you're face to face with someone and fists can be involved, you generally are a different person than when
you're
that
awfully punchy tonight.
I am punchy tonight. It's just my example, right? And
Yeah.
the Apple guy here makes it, that you can look people in the eyes. You don't have that connection. Well, I think that connection is more like you're not in punching range, right? People behave themselves when someone could literally hurt them, right? Um, and that can't happen in virtual spaces. You can be banned. Big deal. Go find a new place to play, right?
But I think part of the reason that you have a lot of issues with social media is that you need, unless you're a very good writer, you can uh, there are people, and I'm not going to name who they are, because I don't know who listens to this, but there are people who on Facebook come across as total screaming assholes, and in real life they're actually great. And
I've
those are people I know. And it's not even that they're what they're saying on social media is particularly vile or anything. They just come across very poorly. But these same people, when I talk to them in real life, are lovely.
Yeah. No, I
And
agree.
so
I agree.
here's the thing though. If the metaverse is going to rely more on voice communication, that's that is actually a an easier medium, I think, to be able to have a more empathetic conversation and an actual dialogue rather than a snarky type. You type something snarky and then you wait for someone to respond to it.
You might be right. You might be right.
I
And
I hope I'm right.
there's also a certain level of when you're writing something. You ever start writing a comment and then you delete it and recreate it, and then you delete
Every
it and
day.
rewrite it, right? Or
Often
like you go back and look for the typos. You look back for the things you didn't mean to say, or the things you want to say in a more emphasized manner, right? Um, you don't get that with voice, right? Because it's real time.
right, which means most people are going to think more carefully when
Right.
they're talking.
That's kind of my point, right? I mean, you could also get the I accidentally misspoke stuff that you get with real life, right? Like I didn't really
Absolutely.
mean to say that. It didn't come out the way I meant for it to come out, right? That's also
But
possible.
with voice communication, you also have the inflection. If you even if you don't have video, even if you don't have video and it's a straight audio conversation, that is helpful. And if you have some sort of video in the mix, and that could include two virtual avatars standing at each other, and the software can be clever enough to sync your mouth and sync your eyes, and see what your arms are doing, because part Italian, so I talk with my hands, right?
Yeah, no, and there is a lot of work being done on exactly that. I mean, I think even the VR headsets that you and I have will do eye tracking. Like
Yeah.
I didn't even
So
know it was a feature, but if you go into something that supports eye tracking, it does it. I don't
didn't
know
we
if it's just
did,
coincidence or not, but
didn't we figure out that if you're using the built-in voice chat in No Man's Sky, that your avatar's mouth will move?
it seemed to. Yeah. But
Yeah,
and absolutely, when you're talking, it'll try to mimic what you're saying. In things like VR chat, for example, that are meant to be a social interaction platform.
right.
Um, but yeah, it's absolutely better, I think,
So
than flat
I
out
don't,
text, which I think is your
I
point.
don't, yeah. So I don't think it's as dark as our friend here is saying. Um, I, I, I think they're valid concerns, but if I think it's not as dark as you think,
I don't know. I
and
have
hopefully, and I'm
social
always a little.
media has given me this much faith in humanity, and that faith has been trampled on so many times.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear
But
you.
maybe you're right, and it'll be better. Um, I do think there's a certain amount of disconnect with being physically in person with other people, right? You don't get that interaction, and maybe I'm wrong, right? Maybe I just haven't actually had those sort of interactions because
Are you
the
working for big commercial real estate now, trying to convince people to get back in the office? Watch out.
the time that I have spent in virtual spaces has been very like tentative. I haven't really dove in because it just kind of isn't my thing. Like
Some
VR
of it
chat,
seems skeevy.
it does, but I don't know.
Maybe we should go hang out in VR chat
I
sometime
was
and
gonna
like
say
go bar hopping or
maybe
something.
you and I should give it a shot some night and just like try to really give it a try, see how it goes, right? And then like
I
you can be the extrovert that you are, and I'll be standing back over there, just like we
yeah,
were at a conference.
can try it. Can try it.
So, but yeah, I think there's a lot to unpack here, and we already started. But I think that there's no way we're going to be able to cover it all. And honestly, we're going to see how it plays out. Maybe it plays out better than we think it will. I don't know. Maybe it'll play out worse.
Hopefully, it plays out better than you think it will.
Yeah, yeah. Hopefully, better than the guy from Apple does. Thinks it's going to play out.
Yeah,
Uh,
I feel you kind of agree with them,
kinda, kinda.
and that's okay. But because we're talking, we're not fighting on, we're not flaming each other on a Facebook comment thread.
Right, right. So I mean, that could exactly be the point, right? If you and I were discussing this on a Facebook thread, it may pan out totally differently than when you and I are discussing it person to person, quote unquote, over
This
this
is
live
effectively
stream,
person.
right?
It's 2022. This is
Right.
person to
Yeah,
person.
right. This is what we pass as person to person now.
Because it's fine. It's fine.
This is fine. All right. So enough about the metaverse.
Dog sips coffee in hell.
you added a bit here about some Nvidia stuff. Is that the next one on the list? It is.
So in things that holy crap we never thought might happen, Nvidia is open sourcing parts of its Linux drivers, which is something they've never been willing to do before.
Yeah.
And this is
Never really understood
significant
that.
because they're providing the source code for the kernel modules, which is the hardest part for like open source people to like backwards engineer, reverse engineer. So this is a pretty big friggin' deal. This is really the next step in high performance video drivers on NVIDIA graphics cards in like, Linux gaming.
Yeah. So the thing that makes this a little more revolutionary, and I don't know, I didn't really read the article. You
A
added
lot
it
of
in
this is
last minute,
yeah, a
but
lot of this is targeted at GPU work in data
I was
centers
just
for
gonna
like
say, right?
AI
High
and
performance
AI and machine
compute,
learning. Yeah.
the cryptography, and I don't mean crypto mining, but yes,
Oh,
but cryptography work, password hashes, hash cracking, stuff like that. Those are all valid things that happen within the industry, and this is going to help that because graphics processors are also great for that style of crypto crunching, which is why they're in such high demand at the moment because everybody and their brother wants to mine friggin' whatever the latest cryptocurrency is. Um, Stop killing the environment with your GPUs and your cryptocurrencies. Damn it. I want to kill it with my Jeep and my V8 and my Cadillac. Damn it.
yeah. Yeah. And on the article, there's somebody who doesn't understand open source. It opens up a plethora of attack vectors into your server. No, that's not, believe me.
It
Opening the code makes those
it
things easier
opens
to
up a
spot.
plethora of eyes on the code which would have had vulnerabilities in it anyway.
Exactly.
Is what it comes down to. So yes, what we may see in the next 6 to 8 months are a bunch of people that have said, "Oh crap, I found this cool vulnerability in NVIDIA's graphics drivers," and then it'll quickly get patched because there will be people with eyes on the code more than just NVIDIA's development team. But I'm preaching to the choir here, to you anyway. Maybe there's somebody
You
listening who
are.
doesn't understand the open source ecosystem, but. So anyway, NVIDIA open source drivers, cool, good stuff. And
So,
you've got
yeah.
a you've got a gaming related thing next, huh? From
Yeah, funny. So
from
you mentioned Cyberpunk, right?
Kotaku, is that the name of this place?
Yeah, Kotaku's basically they're kind of clickbaity, but what the hell?
Okay.
Um, so you mentioned Cyberpunk,
Yep.
and though for people who aren't in who don't really do computer gaming, they're only here for proper enterprise IT discussion. Sorry, we
Sorry.
talk gaming here too. Cyberpunk was launched as a steaming turd in a lot of ways, especially on last gen console. It was rushed to be released. There were an embarrassing number of bugs, missing content, um, and Cyberpunk's kind of become the new No Man's Sky. With No Man's Sky, when it was released, was missing so many features that were supposed to be in it.
Yeah.
Although Hello Games has spent years fixing that. But Bethesda, which is who are they're the folk obviously behind Skyrim, uh, Elder Scrolls series, Fallout. They have a bit of a bad reputation as far as it's almost expected that their games are buggy for quite a long time. Um, and they just announced that Starfield, which is a sci-fi RPG, it was supposed to be released in November of this year. It's now pushed to the first half of 2023. And this is kind of what I call a damned if they do and damned if they don't situation. Because you've already got people on the internet complaining that it's been delayed.
Yeah.
Oh, I wanted to play it this year. My life is going to be meaningless now. Oh. And then there's an equal chorus that's like, well, good, because God knows Bethesda doesn't know how to release software that's feature complete and has minimal bugs at launch, so the delay is probably a really good thing. The super cynics are like, yeah, they just don't want Elden Ring kicking their ass as game of the year, because that would probably happen.
It's valid.
So they're damned if they do, they're damned if they don't. If they release it as originally planned, they could have the next Cyberpunk on their hands.
Yeah. Yeah.
They delay it so it's better, they catch grief about that. Now, knowing Bethesda, they're going to delay it and it'll launch in a questionable state anyway. And I'm a Bethesda fan. I've bought a lot of their games. I've bought Skyrim so many times I've lost friggin' count.
Yeah.
But that's probably what they're really gonna do.
Yeah. This is. I'm kind of excited now. This sounds like a fun game, and this article is the only exposure I've had to it so far. I'm as much as I like mythology RPGs, right? Like the old fairy tale and fantasy style RPGs. I love sci-fi probably even more than I love fantasy, right? So, which is why I was excited about Cyberpunk. This looks like it'll be fun.
I agree, and Bethesda also they've been using they use what's called the Gamebryo engine, and I always get amused because you get people who don't understand how gaming engines work.
Yeah.
Who are absolutely convinced that they've been using literally the same code since Morrowind, which was, God, I don't know how long ago. I'm like, no, that's not how engines work. The engine gets upgraded and worked on and modernized over time.
Yeah, because obviously everything based on the Unreal Engine is still based on Unreal from 2002 or whatever, right? Yeah, that's.
But they're like, it's going to be garbage because they need a new engine. No, you don't understand how gaming engines work. Thanks for playing.
Yeah, and to be honest, like I'm not going to say I've ever done anything like game development, but I have tinkered with Unity which is another game development platform, right?
Yeah.
When I was tinkering with VR
Same
space,
space as Gamebryo.
and it's I mean, monthly it felt there was an update to the code base and the engine and the editor and every facet of it, to the point where
Right.
your projects that were built in one version with one engine would need to be sort of migrated to the next, which was kind of exhausting for someone who was just doing this as a tinkery thing, right?
Right, which is why you lock onto a specific version at some
Yeah,
point.
exactly. That's
And
that's
you're
what
like,
you should do if you're building
you're
a project. Yeah,
it's like the app people, stop updating our stuff.
yeah.
But we need to. Security vulnerabilities.
Yeah, that's a little different. But you're right. So, they latched on to whatever version of the engine was viable at the moment they started game development, or the moment they had all their assets together anyway. And then that's what they're going to launch on. It's probably what it comes down to, right?
So yeah, it'll be interesting to track this one. Now, I don't know if it's going to be available. I don't know what platforms it's going to be on. They're calling it an Xbox exclusive.
Okay.
So that could be Xbox and Windows. It could just be Xbox.
Yeah.
I would like it to come, Xbox console exclusive. I really would have I would buy it on PS5, but I'm not buying a friggin' Xbox to play it.
I'm absolutely not buying an Xbox to play it. So now I'm disappointed. Why do they do that? Like, why release it on Xbox only? Why not?
Because there's a lot of friggin' Xboxes out there.
Yeah, but doesn't that just limit their own market?
And Microsoft bought Bethesda some time back, recently, actually.
Yeah, so release it for Windows too.
They probably will.
Like
it'll probably drop on Xbox first,
like and then stake in Windows.
Windows. It probably Xbox first and then Windows. That's
what
I imagine is going to happen.
For a lot of people, Windows is their game system.
Well, right.
Me included, right? Like, that's it. I don't really go into consoles anymore.
Here's the other thing. If they release it on Windows, then they got to deal with all the bullshittery that is, releasing a game on Windows. It's actually harder to engineer it to be.
Yeah.
Like,
that's valid,
I guess. You know the deal. If you're dropping it on a console, you've got a limited hardware platform. You can tune it perfectly.
One or two platforms to make it perfect for. Yeah, I guess that makes sense.
I mean, Elden Ring runs on current and last gen PlayStation and Xbox with very few complaints. The PC version, they seem to have ironed it out now because it works fine for me, but the PC version legit has had some struggles.
Yeah.
And by the time you and I bought it, it's in much better shape. But the PS5 version, which I owned much earlier, has been flawless.
Yeah.
Flawless. Did I mention it's been flawless?
You may have mentioned that it's flawless.
Haven't had a single crash. Haven't really been able to identify any bug. Like, it's been flawless. Now, some people would say you're not picky enough. It's frame capped at this, or there's pop-in, or blah, 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 console peasant, whatever.
Console peasant.
Yeah.
All right, so this has been fun. Fun conversation about games. I forgot to hit record buttons. It's been a good show.
I think we're good.
We talked all about. We touched on software piracy. That's always a good thing.
Yeah, speaking of, I'm going to go watch the next episode of Strange New Worlds, which is on a certain...
Totally not illegal, I'm sure.
Certain platform that rhymes with sex. Yeah.
All right, folks. If you have stuck around for this whole live stream, thank you for doing so. If you do, in the future, want to stick around for one of our live streams, you can find us on both YouTube and Twitch. Just find the Iron System In podcast. Links in the description of the show if you want to just click on them instead of trying to look around for them. But I'm going to tell you, it's not hard to find. If you want to join our community and chat with us or other listeners, or
you should
just talk about gaming or talk about IT or talk about all kinds of stuff, there's rooms for all of that on our Discord community. Discord.
I'll even play Elden Ring with you, as long as it's not on Xbox,
Yeah.
PlayStation, and Windows only.
So both Mark and I do on occasion stream, sometimes even together, our games. You can find those things there as well if you're into gaming and you want to see us play games instead of talk about IT. Yeah, you can find us on the social medias. Just look for the Iron Sysadmin Podcast. You can chat with us. You can see or find out about new episodes or whatever. You can support the show on Patreon, patreon.com/Iron Sysadmin. We love all of our patrons. You guys are awesome. You can even get free merch when you do that for long enough. It's pretty cool. And yeah, I think that's a show. Thank you all for listening, watching, subscribing, liking, all the cool social whatever things that you do to make the shows you like to do the things with. I'm rambling now. I should just find the button. It's here somewhere. You think I have too many scenes in OBS is what it comes down to. So let's go.
Push the button, Frank.
Oh wait, you know what I forgot to do? We were gonna make this a thing while I read the outros.
Yay!
That wasn't it. This is it. All right, enough of that. Night, folks.